Welcome to Rock DIY, or Do It You. If you do it, then it's all you. Exhaust systems can be ordered from many different places. The good thing is that this one is an exact fit for the 2008 Honda CRV EXL 2.4 liter. This exhaust also fits 2007 through 2009 LX, EX, and EXL 2.4 liter models. Everything you see in the picture is what you get, but what is missing and needed are the three nuts, bolts, and lock washers for connecting the resonator pipe to the catalytic converter. You will not get the old ones off without cutting, breaking, stripping, or drilling them to get them off. You will have to purchase them separately. Before getting started, verify you have everything you need to start and finish your work, especially if this is the only car you have. These may or may not be all the tools that you need in order to accomplish this project, but it's dependent on which route you take as far as removing the exhaust and installing the new one. But you will need 13, 14, 15 millimeter sockets and a ratchet, 13, 14, 15 millimeter wrenches, small pry bar, hammer, a hanger tool, although it's not completely necessary, a whiz wheel or cutoff tool, a drill with metal drill bits, a punch, 14 millimeter or smaller, a center punch if you're drilling the bolts out, penetrating oil, a propane torch, and then make sure you have safety equipment, eye protection, gloves, and ear protection. The old exhaust needed to be removed and replaced because it was louder, it was rattling, it had a lot of rust. It was corroded and falling apart, especially between the flanges on the resonator and muffler. It was already broke completely apart, corroded through, and the donut gasket was missing between the two flanges. You can see in the next few pictures where the flange on the resonator pipe completely deteriorated. Basically, the flange on the resonator pipe and the flange on the muffler were not being held together by the spring bolt anymore. Start by removing the muffler. There are three insulators that need to be removed from the hangers. One from the muffler pipe and two from the muffler near the exhaust tip. The next three pictures show the extent of the corrosion on the flange near the muffler. To continue removing the rest of the exhaust, you can remove it as one piece or cut the exhaust pipe extension off the back of the resonator. It'll make it easier to handle if you do decide to cut it off. Then make sure you remove the insulator from the hanger if you do cut it off. It's important to note that if you do replace your exhaust with this new exhaust, it comes in three major pieces. OEM exhaust system on the car is only two pieces, the difference being that the new one has a pipe extension off the resonator that needs to be clamped on. The hardest part is going to be removing the bolts coming off of the flanges on the resonator and the catalytic converter. Using a ratchet with socket or wrenches may be pointless. Cutting off the nuts on the bolts are the best bet. This will allow you to remove the rest of the exhaust, the resonator, and the pipe. There are different options at this point. You can spray penetrating oil and then let that sit for a little while before using a hammer and a punch to knock the bolts out. Use caution when doing this because you don't want to hit the catalytic converter directly with a hammer. You could break the ceramic that's inside it. If you do hear a rattle in your catalytic converter, more than likely the ceramic is broken inside of it and you'll end up having to replace the catalytic converter. Another caution is don't be overly aggressive when you're trying to knock the bolts out because you could end up breaking the bolts off at the engine block. When knocking the bolts out with the punch, use nice centered and solid hits on the bolt. Use a punch that's slightly smaller than 14 millimeters. You don't want to go too small or it will not produce the impact that's needed to knock the bolts out. Another option is to cut off the bolt up to the surface of the flange. Center tap remaining portion of the bolt. This will help keep drill bits centered and prevent it from drifting. Good sharp bits make a big difference. Start with a smaller drill bit, then go to a larger bit. Drill almost all the way through the bolt. Doing this relieves pressure on the serrated ribs on the inside of the bolt and the flange. Then spray it with penetrating oil, let it sit for a little while, and then use a propane torch to heat the bolt and flange. Immediately after heating the flange and the bolt, use your hammer and punch to knock the bolt out, and then repeat the process for the other two bolts. This should work, but if it doesn't, then you have to drill the rest of the bolt or bolts out. Now that you have the old exhaust removed, you're ready to install the new exhaust, but before you install the new exhaust, lay both exhausts side by side to ensure they are alike. Place insulators on the two hangers located on the top of the muffler and route the muffler above the axle. Attach insulators to hangers located on the undercarriage. Don't use lubricant on the insulators. Place the clamp over the resonator exhaust extension pipe and join the pipe to the resonator. Don't tighten the clamp down. You will have to adjust the pipe, and if you tighten it down, you won't be able to adjust the pipe. Place it under the vehicle and secure all three insulators on the exhaust to the hangers on the undercarriage. Place the donut gasket between the flanges, then put the springs, bolts, and nuts on the flanges. Bolts are tapered with a solid piece down to the threads. The thread portion is smaller. The bolt or bolts will pass through the spring, then the first flange. The smooth, solid piece of the bolt must pass through the first flange. The threaded portion of the bolt is the only part of the bolt that passes through the second flange, and then place a nut on the bolt. The donut gasket and the springs that are on the bolts allow the exhaust to have some flex while still maintaining a seal. Tighten the nuts down all the way on the bolts. Next, place the gasket between the flanges on the catalytic converter and exhaust pipe extension coming off the resonator. Put the bolts in, then put the lock washer on, then put the nut on the bolt over the lock washer and tighten them down. Tighten the clamp on the resonator extension pipe last. The reason why is that there may be some downward flex on the resonator, causing it to not sit straight and the resonator hanging low. If it is low or dipping, push up on it or brace it while tightening bolts on the clamp. This Honda CRV did have a missing insulator on the old exhaust. Ensure all insulators are on the exhaust. Insulators prevent unnecessary strain on the exhaust components and prevent it from rattling. The heat shield on the catalytic converter was completely missing on this car, but it was replaced. The heat shield is necessary to redirect or deflect heat to go elsewhere and prevent damage. Not having it on can cause higher temps in the cabin of the car and or damage components directly above it. It can also help with deflecting road debris from hitting the catalytic converter directly. You will have to remove the O2 sensor on the catalytic converter in order to put the heat shield on. The heat shield goes on with 4 bolts with lock washers and nuts. I don't recommend using a cleaner or wire brush to clean the O2 sensor. You could damage it. You may have to use penetrating oil, let it sit for a little while, then use a wrench to remove the O2 sensor. There is a specialty socket that's slotted specifically for an O2 sensor that you could purchase to make the job a little easier. Thanks for watching the video. I truly appreciate it. Please like, comment, or subscribe. Thanks again.